he's going to compliment you the entire time. He might be a little fresh.
The keystone in the arch of Star Wars.
But, you know, I'm not going to say no to George Lucas.
Right. Sorry, I'm getting like emotional.
And he's not this hulking, scary dude with the big nose and the perfect hair.
I understand. This is a safe space. This is a safe space between you and I and all of your viewers.
Cassie and Jim on the beach, and people are like, no. I can literally hear people that go, no.
Rogue One was awesome. I love the Han Solo movie, and then of course I love The Mandalorian.
And like getting to talk to fans face to face and learn their names and just, you know, get to hear their stories.
And in the world of Star Wars, there's a bunch of people who look different and are different species. There's lizard men, there's psychic baby swamp monsters.
I joke that the best thing about writing Princess Leia is everybody knows who she is, and the worst thing about writing Princess Leia is everyone knows who she is.
And also you get Ewoks, and I am definitely a lover of Ewoks.
You're listening to Around the Galaxy.
Yes, it's a good thing. It's a great thing.
Well, welcome to Around the Galaxy, the Star Wars fan talk show. I'm your host, Pete Fletzer, but you probably know that if you're watching us record tonight, that means that you're a patron, and thank you very much for being a part of our Patreon program. We've been having a lot of fun with that over the last couple months, including opportunities for you to hang out with us when we do our interviews. And tonight we are privileged to be speaking to the guy who I don't want to overstate it, but without this guy and Andi Gutierrez of, I just totally butchered her name, of the Star Wars show back in 2016, I wouldn't be doing this. And I think a lot of other people wouldn't be doing this. I think they started the way they created that first Star Wars online video presence, that weekly sort of show. And I'm excited to introduce Mr. Peter Townley. Peter, how are you?
I'm doing okay. How are you, man?
I'm doing great. I'm doing really great. Yeah, I don't mean to overstate it, but like I remember watching the Star Wars show when it first hit, and it was before I was doing anything online. I wasn't even on social media that much, and I remember watching the Star Wars show. Thank you so much for doing that and being a part of that and sort of ushering in this age of internet. And I don't know if you want to be the one who brought in the internet on this, but
I don't know. I mean, the internet was pretty crazy about Star Wars pretty much ever since there was an internet. So
this is true. But this was the first licensed weekly show, or not licensed. I mean, straight out of Skywalker Ranch, Lucasfilm headquarters. So maybe let's take a step back and start early and just sort of say, like, let's find out when you hear the words Star Wars, when you hear those two magic words, what comes to mind for you? What are the earlier memories that come to you?
You know, it's funny because I can't really remember a time when there wasn't Star Wars, because by the time I was like a toddler and like becoming conscious, Star Wars was already everything. Like if I think about the first time that I can ever remember seeing Star Wars was at my friend Matthew Williams's sixth birthday party. And his parents rented a VHS player, and they rented a copy of Star Wars. And my parents came to pick me up while the trench run was going on. And I said, I don't want to go yet. The movie's still going on. And they said to me, you already know what happens. So the first time I remember seeing Star Wars is possibly not the first time that I ever saw Star Wars.
Right.
Yeah.
That's and it's amazing how, so I was 7 when it came out. So, but I don't really remember life before that. And the whole concept of the way it has stayed with us as a culture, never mind individuals, but as a culture since then is pretty amazing. So did it drive you, because you went on to become an actor for a while. Did Star Wars influence the direction you went, or was it just a part of your life?
It was just sort of, I guess a part of my life is a good way to put it. I grew up on a farm, in remote rural Northern California in a very, very dry place. And I wanted nothing more than to get away from it.
You had to do anything. Right?
Yeah. And, Luke Skywalker is from Space Modesto. He wants to get out of his dusty little town and do something more with his life also. And I just recognized myself in that guy immediately when I was a kid. And yeah, it's just something that's kind of always been there with me. Later on, when I went to college, the apartment I lived in my sophomore year, we didn't have cable TV or even a pair of rabbit ears. We had a small CRT television and a VHS player and the Star Wars trilogy. And those are the only movies that we like. Everyone who's my age, everyone who's born in the late 70s has this like common language. And you can basically, when you were born while the original trilogy was really in theaters and that kind of thing, like you can just relate to just about anyone you meet on it,
Yeah. And it is kind of it is like an introduction. It's a calling card. If you see somebody wearing a Star Wars t-shirt, you have that sort of instant connection. And it's been that way since it was released, which is it's pretty amazing. And it is still today. I mean, I told this story not too long ago. I walked into my chiropractor's office wearing a Around the Galaxy t-shirt, and he's like, "Oh, you're a Star Wars fan." And then we had that connection, right? That instant connection.
Yeah, you have something to talk about like right away. Yeah.
Yeah. It's sort of this family, if you will, of people who are just gigantic fans. So let me get right.
And it's also from an earlier era of media too, when you watched whatever was on TV because that was on TV, and you saw whatever movie came out because that was the movie that came out, and so we weren't as like inundated by choice back then either.
Right.
So because like now you'll meet a kid who's never seen Star Wars.
Right.
Because of course he hasn't, because he's got a million things that he can see. And if he doesn't immediately like Star Wars, he doesn't have to watch it. Whereas if you were born in the late 70s, you've seen Star Wars.
Right.
There's probably no way around it.
That's an excellent point too. And also, and now with there being such a flood of Star Wars content, there's almost there's a lack of potentially a lack of appreciation because there is so much of it. So if you like it, you've got it. When you were, if you saw you and I both lived through sort of that dark time after Return of the Jedi, and we had to wait, and we were just reading the Thrawn books and the bizarre EU comics and that sort of thing. And that was all we had. So how did you continue to follow Star Wars through that dark time, or did you kind of move away from it?
A little bit. Let's see, because a lot of the books didn't really grab me that much. The short story books were the ones that I really liked, that I hung on to. Some of those really weird. I had some of the Marvel comics when I was little.
Yep.
And there were those really weird Tales of the Jedi comics that came out in like the 90s, I think.
Yep.
But mostly it was just watching the same movie over and over and over and over again. That's pretty much what being a Star Wars fan was for me through the 80s and 90s.
It's funny because those are I feel like I can still, like, I could probably turn the sound off and watch A New Hope and do every line perfectly. And because of just for that exact reason, it was, you just watched it. And when it was done, you rewound it and you watched it again, or you watched it on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And it was always there. That's interesting. And so, as you went through that, were you excited for the prequels? I'm guessing you were sort of, what were you?
I was in college.
You were in college. Yeah.
Yeah. I remember I was excited. And it was such a very different internet when the prequels came out.
Yes. Yep.
And there was just a very different version of like Star Wars insider charlatanry, however you want to say that. So that was like, it was just like incredibly amusing because I had only recently like gotten onto the internet in any kind of way. And mostly what I used the internet to do at that point was to download the chords to Stone Temple Pilots songs so that I could play them after parties and talk to girls.
Exactly.
So then when I found out there was Star Wars stuff on there, it got very hilarious very quickly because there was the early days of StarWars.com that happened in the late 90s. And then there was like Super Shadow. There were like characters like that who like, I know what Star Wars is actually about.
Right. Yep.
And just kind of how hilarious it was to see people speculating about this movie. But yeah, I went to go see that movie in the theater. I saw it the day after it opened at like 10 in the morning, which is my favorite time to go see any movie. Is as early as possible after opening night, because you don't usually have to wait in line at all. And I saw it at this very small theater. It seemed small at the time, probably because there weren't that many people in it in Santa Barbara, California, where I went to college. And yeah, me and let's see, it was me and Mike and Sam and probably Mike's girlfriend all piled into somebody's car and went to see the Phantom Menace.
And especially because I know exactly what you're talking about. That internet time was so interesting. There were, like Ain't It Cool News and all those websites that had, as you said, all the inside scoop and allegedly the inside scoop. And the buildup for Phantom Menace was enormous. Where did you fall in that fan base, that sort of that honest perspective of, I was at the premiere in New York. And so I walked out of it and I was like, I wasn't sure what I just saw, but some people, and it has grown. Yeah. The prequels to me have evolved as a set of films. How about yourself when you walked out of Phantom Menace?
When it was, because here's the thing also about not seeing something at opening night, like nobody's applauding, no one's super hyped for it. Everyone's just there to see the movie, And so like later on, when I went to see Attack of the Clones, I saw that at opening night in, I think, Glendale. But yeah, Phantom Menace, credits roll, theater is quiet. We all get in the car. And it's a very quiet car ride back to Isla Vista because we're all just kind of going, huh? And it's the thing, and like the first thing that was said, it was my friend Mike Benveniste. I'll never forget it because like it's not people get kind of worked up these days. Well, some people in bad faith get worked up over the idea that like Star Wars is too politically correct now or something like that. And like, as if that's something new, but it's not, because like we're Gen Xers, right? We were teenagers during the Clinton administration when the idea of political correctness really started to enter popular consciousness, and immediately all of our pop culture was against it. With like movies like PCU and comedians like Dennis Leary, and everything was anti-PC. Yep. So that's us, the Gen Xers, going to see the Phantom Menace. And as we're on the way, it's just like, we're not saying anything in the car. And my friend Mike says, I wasn't expecting there to be so many racial stereotypes in Star Wars. It's like, even we knew that something was like a little off about this film. And the Phantom Menace is such a curious movie to look back on in just like sort of a what happened kind of a way. It's so much an unfiltered George Lucas. It's the most auteur of like all the Star Wars films.
Yeah.
Because it's the one that he probably exerted the most control over and approved everything for, and et cetera, et cetera. And it's this really, it's one of the most interesting movies, in my opinion, to think about. Because it's so not what you expect out of a movie. George Lucas, sometimes I think of him as being this experimental film weirdo who accidentally became like this Hollywood film mogul, because he seems to be much, I don't know the guy, but he seems to be more interested in like the technology of filmmaking and what is possible with it than he is about the characters or the story or the plot. And like the Phantom Menace is this amazing, like incredible technological spectacle, you know, and I don't think anyone would deny that. And the other thing, and as a storyteller, I think Lucas is more interested in world building than anything else.
Right.
Based on movies like THX and American Graffiti and Star Wars, he's really into like building this place where people live. And that's entirely what the Phantom Menace is it's this huge how did we get here kind of world building exercise. And that's kind of what the story of the film is. And so it's really weird to even watch it, just knowing about the original trilogy, which are these very traditional like style of movies in terms of plot and character types and motivations and themes and everything else. Because the Phantom Menace is so far removed from a lot of that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, even stylistically and the way it looks, the way the story is told, and I think it was Mike Morisi when he was on my show. He was one of the writers for Empire Strikes Back from a certain point of view, and he made the point that, you know, the prequel trilogy and the Phantom Menace specifically is like the last fully independent major film that we may ever see, or at least in our lifetime, because of the fact that, as you said, I mean, George had, you know, it to a fault, didn't listen to anybody, was so hell-bent on making, like, that was the thing, I think, with A New Hope. He was surrounded by, in hindsight, this amazing group of filmmakers who just became legends themselves as well. And they all had their input. Whereas on Phantom Menace, he was, you know, he had the rubber stamp, right? We've all seen the making of videos, the yes, no. And he was surrounded by people that wanted to make his movie. And that's a really interesting perspective as well. And so yes, I mean, I think Phantom Menace struck people a little bit differently. And has it changed? Has the prequel trilogy changed in your mind at all over the years, or?
It has. It's kind of like, you know, I was initially way too angry at it or something. Like initially I just really didn't like I really didn't like the Phantom Menace for about probably 10 years. And then for about 10 years, I think I ironically liked the Phantom Menace. And now I'm just, I kind of view it as being this sort of oddity where I like it. And also there are many flaws with it, you know, that are a part of what makes it what it is. And I don't know if flaws is the right word, because that sounds like I think someone made a mistake, and I don't think that anyone did necessarily. But it's just it's strange. It's a really odd movie. You know, like because you can think about this movie forever. You can think to yourself, okay, who's the protagonist of the Phantom Menace? Because it's just not clear. Right. Because normally the protagonist is like a rookie type of a character, like Luke Skywalker, someone who's new to the way that things work, and you kind of follow them and learn with them and stuff like that. Well, Obi-Wan is sort of that. He's kind of that character type, but the movie doesn't follow him. The movie follows Qui-Gon.
Right.
It's from his point of view mostly, but Qui-Gon is like the jaded, grizzled old veteran who's kind of smug and doesn't think he really has to play by the rules, and has just a lot of contempt for the world in general, possibly because of the life. It's just like, it's hard to be on that guy's page when you're jumping into a new world.
Right.
And like, in terms of like what usually happens to the protagonist, and that they like start from a place of comfort and then something's wrong, and then they have to go on this journey to get what they need, and they pay a price for it, and they come back, being changed, coming back to their old life, but now something new can begin. And that's what happens to Padme.
Right. Yeah.
Padme, the movie doesn't spend much time with her, and she doesn't really make anything happen in the movie until more than halfway through it. Right. So just in terms of making sense of a movie through its characters, it's kind of hard to do that with Phantom Menace. It's really a strange movie.
I haven't thought of it that way, and that's why I love doing the show, because I love getting different perspectives. But I haven't thought about it that way. Yeah, right. It's nobody's movie. It's not even like an ensemble cast that works really well and grows together, right? It's a bunch of very interesting, unique characters. And to your point, and the thing that I hadn't thought about till you said it was, this movie truly is all about world building, so as a result, you're not getting the character studies perhaps that you might and might want to get. And I also felt that that was a bit of an issue for Attack of the Clones, and even to a degree Revenge of the Sith, is that it was, on paper, I felt like Attack of the Clones, for example, could have been Obi-Wan's movie, but it followed him, but it really wasn't, it wasn't his story. It was somehow Anakin and Padme's story, but Obi-Wan's story was much more interesting, I thought. So, and so now that these films have aged and they've sort of set the stage, I think that's probably, for me, why they work now in hindsight, is because of the fact that they've built this platform, this stage that all this other content has come from. I think, I don't know, maybe I'm reading more into it than there's there.
Well, I mean, that's to that point, I started reading Star Wars comics again after the prequels came out. Let's see, there was a series that I believe Dark Horse did that was called Republic, that I read a whole lot of. Because that's the thing about the prequels, is that because they are so world building intense, it makes it's this great playground for creators outside of the films to see what they can do with.
Right.
And we got the Clone Wars cartoon series because of the prequels and that sort of thing. And I thought some of the comics were very, very good too, because there really was a lot there in the films to build off of.
Yeah.
Because so much effort had been put into creating that world. And now that I think about it, the story of the Phantom Menace kind of really, really is its world building. Yeah. The first thing that the movie does is tell you that the story is about economics.
Right.
It's just like, okay, so this is not going to be nothing like those other films, I guess. And it starts out like if you move through the worlds it takes place in, it starts out on this kind of colonial, this sort of colonial resort world, where dominant species in the galaxies, which sort of clearly seem to be humans by the way that things play out in the film and by who the characters are, have colonized a planet that has a lower technology level species on it. And just rather than mine it for resources, it's like some sort of trade center. So it's being blockaded by this government / trade. It's weird. The Trade Federation is kind of like the British East India Company of the 18th and 19th centuries.
Yeah.
In that they're both a trade organization and they govern, some part of the galaxy. And so they go from this conflict to then somewhere that's totally out of the Republic, which is Tatooine. And so it's just like, okay, we've seen this weird colonial Republic world. Now we go someplace outside of the Republic where slavery still exists, where the government actually doesn't have control over anything because it's on the outer fringes of society. It's an incredibly different place, and it's also a familiar place that we're seeing in a different way. And then they go from Tatooine to Coruscant, which is the Imperial core, which is where all the resources from the outlying worlds are funneled, where all of the money and all of the stuff goes and all of the things happen. And it's in such stark contrast to the other two places that it really gives you the sense that, oh, this is called a republic, but it's already an empire. It's already functioning as one.
Right.
And that's kind of the funny thing about the prequels too, is that it's the story of the fall of the republic, but the republic is already done. By the time the Phantom Menace comes around. They just needed someone to come in and actually take over.
Right. The cracks were in the walls, but they were just about to, it was about to start to crumble. I love that perspective. And it's funny, I've talked about this movie hundreds of times, and that perspective is such a fresh look at it, because it's thinking about why what you're doing is you're helping me to frame what I love about it and what I didn't like about it at first. And it's interesting that you had that similar. I think a lot of the older fans, the original fans or whatever. Geez, I hate to sound like a gatekeeper in any way, but those of us who were there at the beginning had that sort of reaction, because it was simply building that world. But now there's such a generation of fans that was their introduction to Star Wars, and they absolutely love everything about it. I mean, and it's interesting because it's not that I don't love it, because my mindset has changed so much on just the prequels, just simply because I think, as what we were talking about, it because of what you were saying, it built those worlds that now I love seeing what's being built on top of them, which is, I think, a really, in hindsight, a really difficult thing to have done, whether intentional or otherwise. So let's talk a little bit about the Star Wars show. Let's shift gears just a little bit, because I also want to get back to some of the movie stuff, because I want to see where you are on the sequels, but we'll get to that in a couple minutes. But let's talk about the Star Wars show, which was it May 11th, 2016 was the first episode.
It was the week after Star Wars Day, and we had thought we were going to start the show on Star Wars Day, but it got pushed a week for some reason.
I was going to ask if there was a reason why they decided to start the following week, but
I don't know. There was hesitancy about the thing getting started for reasons that I just am not privy to.
So how does one become the first host for the Star Wars show? What was that connection? How did you find yourself in that role?
Well, I got an email from my agent. I was living in the San Francisco Bay Area, working as a commercial actor mostly, and doing more interesting stuff than that when it came up, which is not often down there. So I was doing that. I had an agent. I did pretty good down there. Probably above average, because I could make a good chunk of my living out of doing stuff as an actor, and also have time to do plays and other projects, and work do like a writing gig for a tech company, or I also worked as a fitness trainer, like working at a gym for $15 an hour or whatever, and just stitching together a living by doing that stuff. And I got an email from my agent saying that, hey, there's a potential gig with Lucasfilm, and you're one of the people that we think we're going to submit to it if you're interested. And they'd like you to write, to answer like a couple of questions. And I think it was just one question, just like sort of like describe your relationship to Star Wars, or how you're a fan of it, or that kind of thing. So I ended up writing like way too much, probably, because I can just go on and on and on about Star Wars. And this was this was actually this was sometime in 2015 that happened. And I got called in, and I did 3 different auditions.
Mm-hmm.
I went in, and I met Scott, and I met Andi, and I did like a couple of reads, and I think I did like a mock interview of someone, and then I just didn't hear anything for a long time. And like that, and then what it turns out is that, The Force Awakens was coming out, and so plans for the show had just gotten put on hold. And then in February of 2016, I was at Sketchfest, which is a comedy festival in San Francisco, and I had gone to see Maria Bamford, who was incredibly funny.
Yes.
And in the lobby, I ran into Scott Bromley.
Mm-hmm.
It was just like, oh, hey, man. Hey, how's it going? And he says, I think you're going to hear from me sometime soon. I think we might have something after all. And so I got called in, I don't know, March or April, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And I did 3 more auditions. And then I guess it was late April or early May, my agent told me I had the job. And so yeah, I became a contract employee at Lucasfilm, and then instead of just booking a commercial here or there, for the rest of 2016, I was doing stuff over at Lucasfilm for 1 or 2 days a week, and shooting the show, and going out and filming whatever little weird sketch there was.
Mm-hmm.
Going to Celebration in July, which was really amazing. And yeah, it was cool. It was kind of a strange process getting there, now that I think about it. Like, that's just not what auditions are like usually.
Right. Yeah. And so you did it for about a year. And so during that time, you did so many interesting, I mean, it almost felt like Star Wars or Lucasfilm was sort of exploring the space, because your first interview was with Duncan Jones, right? And I'm still trying to figure out he
wasn't the first person I interviewed, but that was the first one that
aired. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, that it's the heart. Like, I don't really know much about booking the show. I think Andi booked the show, if I remember correctly. But it's tough when from what I gather is that from both this and just talking to other people who do shows, it's hard to book a guest for the first episode of a show.
Sure. Yeah.
Because it's like, you don't have, well, this is our show, we want you to come.
Trust us, it's going to be great.
yeah. So it could be tricky. And so Duncan Jones was doing the post-production stuff on Warcraft, which was being handled by ILM. So he was there, and the show was able to bring him in to be interviewed while he was at ILM, for example.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah. So what's some of your favorite memories from your time on the show?
Let's see. I got to ride in the back seat of a race car at the Sonoma Raceway. That was pretty amazing. That was a really fun remote that we got to do. I got to meet Kevin Smith, who was Clerks was like me and my friends' favorite movie when we were in college.
Yeah.
So that was, that was pretty cool. I'd never been to a Star Wars celebration before.
Mm-hmm.
And so Celebration London in 2016 was the first time I'd ever been to a Star Wars convention. And it just kind of blew me away, like just how huge all of that was.
Yeah.
Just how many people and all of the stages and panels and presentations and moving parts and vendors and just this massive amount of effort and enthusiasm, all concentrated around the fact that you like Star Wars. There's nothing like that. That's really incredible. And I also got to go out to Rancho Obi-Wan and talk to Steve Sansweet too.
Yeah.
Speaking of Celebration as being the guy who kind of got that thing going.
Yeah. Yep.
And getting to the thing that I really love about Rancho Obi-Wan is the fan art that's in there. The fan art is the stuff that I really, really love. I'm not a collector. I'm not like a merchandise guy.
Right.
I have this, which is a quilt that my mom made for me.
That's awesome.
And I have a painting that someone gave me of Ula from Return of the Jedi, and those are my two Star Wars things that I have. I don't really have anything else.
That's great though. I mean, I think it's a strange thing because I think everybody who is a Star Wars fan, I think there's this assumption that they're all like, you look behind me, you have like this crazy sort of obsession with something, but it's enjoyable in different ways to different people. So the collectibles is, and that's what's great about Rancho Obi-Wan is just, he's got so many different things. And in fact, it's interesting you say that because when I worked with Steve at Star Wars Galaxy Star Wars Galaxy magazine. And, when I had him on the show, he was one of my earlier guests, just simply because I knew him. And he said the things he likes are very similar to what you say. He likes the things that are so unique and one of a kind and sort of created by a person who's inspired by it. And I think that's what, the quilt behind you, my mother's actually a quilter, so I can appreciate what goes into that, and a hand painted picture that's a one of a kind that somebody was inspired to do and that's amazing what Star Wars does for people. And it either, drives them in different ways. So. Yeah.
Just, one of the things that impressed me so much when I went to Celebration, for example, was the costuming.
Mm-hmm.
It is unbelievable, and, because I have this job, the only social media thing I use at all is Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
And because my Twitter handle was next to my name when I was doing the show,
right.
Like that's who I know on Twitter. And so my Twitter feed is just, it's tons and tons of fan art and people wearing their costumes and stuff like that. And I just love that stuff.
Have you ever been inspired to do any costuming yourself?
I really haven't.
Mm-hmm.
That's just, that's something that I really, really appreciate, but just don't see myself really participating in. Like I'm not, like I said, the first celebration I went to was the one where I had the job. It's just, as a fan, Star Wars is something that is more of a personal than a social thing to me.
Right.
It's not something I'm used to, like going out with a whole bunch of people and being excited about. Star Wars is just something that kind of lives in here for me. So like because costuming and trooping and all of that really, really cool stuff, they're all social events. That's just not something that is my natural inclination to combine with Star Wars. I'm more someone who will just sit around and overthink it, you know?
It's funny. I think people make an assumption because I have all these helmets. I put on a Kylo Ren costume for my kids with Halloween, and that's about as far as I've got. Because like you, it's interesting, and I love that perspective as well. It's a very personal thing, and again, it goes back to that sort of thing we said at the beginning about it's sort of this club, right? And it's when I was a kid, and I imagine it was very similar to you, it was, I sort of believe me and my 3 or 4 friends were the biggest Star Wars fans in the world, and it was our thing, and we loved Star Wars. And then when the internet exploded, as you were saying, even, during the Phantom Menace time, especially when suddenly everybody was coming out of the woodwork, StarWars.com had launched, there was the ability for other people to connect. It suddenly became clear that, my goodness, there's so many people out here, and obviously there were, because it was the top grossing film of all time and all the things that just made sense if you took a second and thought about it. But there was absolutely there was this sort of personalization, or this personal impact that I feel like Star Wars has always had, and that's what's so exciting and interesting about Celebration. I have never been to a Celebration. I'm going to be going to my first Celebration in Anaheim next year, and or is it? Yeah, it's next year. It's not this year. It's just one big blur. But I'm excited, and I'm taking my kids, and I'm excited to sort of see what that sort of pilgrimage kind of concept is really like. So you were on the show for about a year. Do you keep in touch with the folks who are still there, or do you have you kind of separated yourself from?
Not really. Yeah. I just I'll holler at Scott from time to time, or just interact with people on Twitter, but not really. Mostly I hear from them if they want me to do a sketch for them or something like that.
And do you it's a weird way to ask the question, but did leaving the show impact your interest in Star Wars? Did it sort of leave did it take you time to get back to Star Wars, or was it just sort of a move on and still keep that fandom, your own personal fandom, at that high level?
It took a minute, it sort of felt like Star Wars broke up with me for a little while, and that was a tough one to get over with. You got to go to the gym, and really just sweat it out for a while. But no, I got over it pretty quick. Oh no. My gaff tape failed me.
That's all right. It's a hot day in California.
It is. It's 95 degrees up here right now.
Yikes. That's horrible. So you were in the thick of things in social media as a result of being on the Star Wars show, and you're still on Twitter. You're still fairly active. I see you there. What are your thoughts on the evolution? I'm being very polite, of the evolution of the Star Wars fandom and where it sits today. I don't see you engaging, which is probably the smart thing to do, but there's the Star Wars fandom has changed, it feels like, or at least some of the different voices have gotten louder. But how do you see it as a fan and somebody who's actively involved in the fan relationships for Lucasfilm? How do you feel when you look at the sort of the state of Star Wars fandom now? Because there's so much positive, but there's also that little undertone of negativity.
Yeah. Because I mean, the cool thing about the internet is that anyone can make a show or put their opinion out there, have a discussion about something, et cetera, and that's neat. Mm-hmm. But the unfortunate thing that goes along with that is content algorithms, and what drives traffic to things, and how often do you have to make stuff in order for it to be seen, and it seems as though things that are negative get more views than things that are positive.
Right.
It's something because I've read some stuff about this. They're like content creators talking about how like they like to make best of lists, but the unfortunate fact is that worst of lists always get them more traffic.
Sure. Yep.
And so there is kind of just a negativity trade. It probably gets you a lot more attention to be angry at Star Wars than it does to enjoy it.
Yep.
You know,
it's true.
Because people really love to argue, and people especially love to argue on the internet. And it's much easier to start an argument with why thing sucks and here's why is much better than just saying that you liked it. I mean,
yeah.
And there's the thing that bothers me though is that it's one thing to like or dislike Star Wars just like as a fan. Everyone has their likes or dislikes or wants to play armchair quarterback, and it could have been this way or the other. The really bad faith stuff that I don't like is when Star Wars is being framed as part of some sort of ongoing culture war.
Right.
And which is, essentially just real world political ideas trying to grab onto Star Wars, something that people know a lot about, and pull them towards their ideology using it. A very old political tactic is to say that things were better before. Things were better before, and modernity is corrupt and has dragged things down, and we need to go back to the glorious past so that things can be better. And lots of political movements have used this rhetoric, and lots of very, very ugly political movements have used this rhetoric. And Star Wars is a very easy target for this because there are people who are our age and somewhat younger, who have all this nostalgia for the original trilogy and might be very swayed by someone making the argument that, Star Wars was better in the 70s and 80s, and the people who are making it now just don't get it, man. And that's someone's entry point in trying to convince you that modernity and the things that go along with it, all of the other ideas that have changed since then about, diversity and inclusiveness, that those are the things that are bad, because those are the things that got us away from the old Star Wars. I just am I'm very disappointed to see people not only engaging in that bad faith, not only like stirring up that bad faith argument, but for the rest of us in so easily being baited into participating in it and amplifying their voices.
Guilty.
I try just not to say anything about it and just go, oh God, it's another one of these.
Yeah. It's hard because I think, there's there's that other side too, right? There's the side that is throwing out the things were better the way they used to be. And then there's the folks like us who we have such love for it to like see it being used that way is what pulls you in. And that's what they kind of bank on, I think. And that's what makes the clickbait continue, and it keeps amplifying those voices. And I mean, if you follow me, you'll see that I do get sucked into that. And simply because I just don't understand the phrase that I saw that I like is why yuck someone else's yum, and I don't understand why that is. And it's like you said, you could go online and talk about things you love all day, but there's always that one troll, that one person who's just waiting for that opportunity to slap at it. And Star Wars has, I think, because of the fact that it is multi-generational now, because you do have an old days versus a new trilogy or new show, and it definitely lends itself to that kind of a conversation. So you find yourself you try to stay out of it as much as you can.
Yeah, because I mean, because there's always this massive. We all get this massive temptation of knowing that someone else is wrong.
Right.
You know.
Right. Yep.
It's one of the earliest traps of the internet. Is like someone is wrong and I must set them right, and it's just like that's not how this is going to go down. This is just...
right. Yeah. Well, and to your point too. I mean, just the the applying political perspectives on what's supposed to be a nice form of escapism. And I look, I'm also not so naive to think that it's not. There is not that connection that that connection to good films reflect society, right, in a way, right, or good stories.
Oh yeah, and Lucas's films do in a big way, and a theme throughout. Political themes are in all of his movies.
Right.
THX 1138 is this vision of an authoritarian society. Mm-hmm. American Graffiti is about his generation, the baby boomers, at their most hopeful, having everything pulled away from them by Vietnam.
Right.
Star Wars is this incredible fantasy, this incredible Buck Rogers inspired fantasy that also has at its core the fact that there is an authoritarian empire who are just the bad guys, because that's who is the bad guy.
Right. Yes. Yep. But to your point too, it's pulling that into, and then turning it. The thing that drives me the most crazy is, as somebody who has a podcast, somebody who has given up on trying to use YouTube as a way to fund the show, because YouTube is just an algorithm changing monster, and but to watch the keyboard cowboys find ways to just drive the absolute 100% bullshit that comes out of their mouths, and people are buying it. And the worst thing is, I got a call from my dad after a story appeared in Forbes that quoted one of these clickbait artists and about the sequel trilogy being rebooted and I was shocked that it had gained enough. The clickbait sites had gained enough momentum. The negative side of the fandom had gained a large enough voice that Forbes pulled a quote and used it. And that's the danger of it. And whether it's Star Wars or anything else, it's that using this internet age to make money off of the negativity and not having to be held accountable for it, I think. So
yeah, it's such a different. It's just such a different thing. When I was born at the tail end of Generation X, or like the very early part of the millennials, and we were the last kids to grow up without the internet. Kind of. I wasn't connected until the internet until I was getting out of high school, and my first email address was the one that I got from my college.
Right.
And no one ever is going to have that experience again.
That's true.
Everyone is hooked up to it from the very beginning. And it's very hard to have your own fun, I would imagine, as a kid, when there's constantly this chorus of people around you telling you that the thing that you like sucks. I can't imagine how terrible that must be.
Yeah, no, you're right. And I mean, can you imagine the reaction to something like Empire Strikes Back or Return of the Jedi in today's internet world? It would be...
Well, and that's the funny thing is when people will actually post articles like the actual print reviews of people who didn't like The Empire Strikes Back, for example.
Right.
Because we have this, because the thing of there not having been an internet in 1980 is that we can think to ourselves that's everyone's favorite Star Wars movie, right? The Empire Strikes Back. That's the one that most people seem to think is the best one.
Yep.
But like, no, you can find print reviews of The Empire Strikes Back that are scathing. And people that think it's stupid that Darth Vader is Luke Skywalker's dad.
Right.
Or people who thought that the Yoda puppet was terrible. It's
Sure.
like those takes have always been around. It's just that they had no ability to go viral in the 1980s.
Right. There was no money to be made unless it was printed in Starlog magazine or something like that.
Yeah.
But, yeah. Oh, that's great. So, so you're no longer acting. You're working on the family farm. Are you back up in Northern California?
Yeah, I'm back up in Northern California. I left the Bay Area almost a year ago. I won't go into it, but I am where I'm needed right now.
That's great. That's great. Well, I miss you on the Star Wars show. I thought you were fantastic on the show, and I'm privileged and honored to have been able to take an hour of your time to just talk Star Wars with somebody who I was who I really enjoyed looking forward to. I look forward to seeing every week. So this has been a real pleasure for me. Where can people follow you on Twitter to keep up with these insights?
Yeah, I'm Townley Peter on Twitter, and that's pretty much the only place I am on the internet. So
excellent. Well, Peter, thank you so much. This has been a real pleasure for me to get the opportunity to talk to you, and I hope I get a chance to talk to you again soon. Are you going to go to Star Wars Celebration? Will people see you wandering around there?
No, I will be somewhere appreciating Star Wars by myself, probably.
Excellent. Right. Unless you're working it, you don't want that crowd.
I'm good. I'm good.
That's excellent. Well, Peter, thank you so much. This has been so fun, and I hope to talk to you again sometime.
That sounds great.
Excellent. Thank you.
Take care, Pete.
Before I let you go, can I get you to do a little bumper that, this is Peter Townley and you're listening to Around the Galaxy?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
This is Peter Townley, and you're listening to Around the Galaxy.
Awesome. Peter, thank you so much. This was a blast. I'm going to abuse your Twitter handle next week when it drops, and I'm going to just end the broadcast here.